Good afternoon and welcome to day two. We have some wonderful panelists here today to discuss environmental justice and air quality monitoring in Washington, D.C. And as we begin, if you could all take 30 seconds and introduce yourselves and tell people who you are and what you're presently doing and why you're excited about today's presentation. That would be great. Thank you.
Any particular order, or should I just go first?
You can go first, Kane.
Thank you, Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me. My name is Kane Samuel. I'm an air quality forecaster and data analyst for DC's Department of Energy and Environment in the Air Quality Planning Branch. I'm also a first-year master's student at Howard University in the Atmospheric Science Department. I'm really excited about today's talk because environmental justice is something that really is important to me in my life. Growing up in Baltimore, I've experienced some of the lows of just like poor air quality, and I'm just very fortunate enough that I work in this field and I can educate like-minded individuals on this topic. Thank you. Somebody go next.
I can go. I'm Prashona Embry, and I'm the communications coordinator for DC Environmental Justice Coalition. So super excited to be here. I'm excited to have gotten into this work over a year ago. And for me, it's been a lot of learning from scientists in our coalition, from policy workers, from community workers who come with a wealth of knowledge, of experience, and then translating that, bringing that back to DC residents, bringing back to the classroom. I'm also a science teacher, so just making it all relevant and a part of our everyday learning as well. So thank you for having me.
I'll go next. My name is Sabrina Rhodes. I am a community organizer with Empower DC here in Ivy City, also the ANC commissioner here in Ivy City. I'm a lifelong, I grew up in DC, and I'm excited about this work. Ivy City has a lot of environmental issues going on, including the city as a whole, but Ivy City in particular. And I just feel honored to be able to work with some longtime residents and work with a lot of organizations, a lot of groups to combat the issue that we're dealing with here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Who's up next?
Go ahead. I was going to go next.
Hey, everybody. I'm jumping in the assist with this session. Go ahead,
Thank
Davida.
you.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Davida Herzl, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Acclima. We took a very sort of crazy route to this moment. So I'm actually in San Diego right now, where I grew up. I grew up near the border, but now run our company in the Bay Area, and we have Acclima now doing good work all over the country. Thanks to our partnership with the EJ community and the work that we've been doing together, which I'm so proud of, it has taken us about 12, almost 15 years to build this technology and these capabilities, which I dedicated sort of those years of my life to building because I thought it was absolutely essential to fill in the data gaps. That data is just one piece of the solution. Community advocacy and all of the amazing policy work and everything that's happening around and in this space are critical. But I came to the realization several years ago that data could play a very catalytic role in empowering and supporting the change we want to see, that we all want to see, on behalf of communities that have been sidelined. And so we're very proud to be working in DC right now. The first place that our technology has been deployed in Washington, DC is Ivy City and 2 other communities. And so I'll be excited to talk through the work that we're doing there and pretty soon to share the initial results. So excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that, the introductions. And I think for me, being the moderator, I won't talk too much, but really excited to see the work that's happening in DC and really these new partnerships that are basically developed over time. So the first question to kind of dig in and talk about the set the table and what's happening. Can Sabrina, can you talk more from your perspective about what are the core environmental justice and air quality issues that your community's been experiencing and dealing with, over the last 5-10 years or so?
Well, the core issues is, first of all, there's a chemical plant here in Ivy City that's been operating since the 30s with cancer-causing chemicals and no air permit. So that's first and foremost. Then we house over 50% of industrial polluters, which is businesses. The businesses that's city businesses, the districts, industries are housed here in Ward 5. And Ivy City and our neighboring community, Brentwood, we carry the brunt of those industries. So the pollution is coming from a lot of the idling, a lot of the this chemical plant here in Ivy City, and the businesses that's doing industry things that are getting into our air, getting into our water and soil.
Okay, thank you for that. Kane, do you have slides you want to share to kind of talk about, before you share the slides, DOEE is, of course, as everybody knows, is the regulatory agency for DC. But can you talk about, in your presentation, what's happening in response to some of the issues Sabrina outlined and some of the other communities that are dealing with traffic-related pollution, major mobile sources, also stationary sources. So I'll go ahead and pass the mic to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dr. Wilson. So I do touch on all of these issues in the PowerPoint. So did you want me to go straight into that, or?
You go ahead. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. So first and foremost, I want to ask, do I have control over the slides, or is somebody going to move them? Either way is fine with me. I just want to know.
Paul, you're on mute.
Okay. Seems like I might have control. So, just for the sake of bandwidth and things that might be going around, I'm going to turn my camera off since everyone got the opportunity to see my face. Just as a reminder to all on the call, my name is Kane Samuel, and I am the air quality forecaster and data analyst in DC. Today's presentation is going to be air quality monitoring in the District of Columbia and how we address some of those environmental justice concerns mentioned by ANC Roads and some other community members. So I'm going to start off by just giving everyone an overview of some of the talking points that I'm going to cover. We're going to hit three things. First and foremost, the new Ward 8 monitoring site and how it's going to introduce a new site in the underserved communities where some of the funding might have come from. Second thing I'm going to touch on is community scale monitoring. So we have someone from ACLIMA on it, so I'm just going to touch on it very briefly, not intrude on her presentation. It seems like a three-step process, or at least on the district's end. Community monitoring grant and all that's included within that. And, talk about a little bit of low-cost sensor deployment. I know we have a lot of social scientists, community advocates, community stakeholders, and, as technology evolves, more people are empowered and have the science in their hands. So I kind of want to just touch on that and maybe some how-tos and maybe best practices when using these devices and how you can get some meaningful data and communicate that with the public. The last thing, which is the most important thing to me, is the community outreach. How we engage the residents, how we're intentional in our approach as far as DOE is concerned. And just to kind of tell you, we're not doing science for the sake of science. We're not just telling folks what it is that we're doing and just, hey, you got to run with it. But we're actually getting the community involved and we're getting that feedback and we're having these meaningful conversations. So as I go into the next slide, I like to always give people an overview of what the monitoring looks like in the district. Some of you may know what the sites are. Some of you may not know. Some of you might not know what's there. So we're just going to just take a little step by step and just kind of give you a brief overview of what's going on and what we monitor. So let's just start from the very top of the diamond. I mean, to me, it looks like a diamond. So we have the Coleman Recreation Center. It's in Northwest Ward 4, because I think it's important to talk in terms of wards for this presentation. There, we measure ozone, ground level ozone, not to be confused with what's in the stratosphere, protects us from ultraviolet rays. And then we also have oxides of nitrogen. Then when we go further down, we have our McMillan site, which is kind of at the borderline of Ward 1 and Ward 5. I like to call it our super site. You know, it sounds like a home base or like a NASA headquarters, the way I like to interpret that. We measure 5 out of the 6 criteria pollutants, all with the exception of lead. So that's ozone, ground level ozone. We measure PM 2.5, PM10. We do oxides of nitrogen. We do SO2. We also do surface-based meteorology, and we even measure volatile organic compounds. As we go further down, we have River Terrace Education Campus right there along, like, I guess that's like Ward 7. And right behind that, we have the Anacostia Freeway, which I like to call our near road station, which is along 295. At both of these monitoring sites, we measure PM 2.5. We also do a little bit of surface-based meteorology too. And we do ozone and we do carbon monoxide. And then if we just go a little bit over to the left in Ward 6, we have our King Greenleaf site, which is in Buzzard Point. There we do PM 2.5. One thing I just want to point out, which I mean, all of you probably can tell, is that I do acknowledge that as of right now, we don't have any monitoring sites in Ward 8. And you're probably wondering, like, hey, like, what are you going to do about that? Like, why not? And I would like to say this. Hey, we actually have a monitoring site coming. That's the new monitoring station in Ward 8. The funding comes from the American Rescue Plan. What that's going to do is we're going to measure PM 2.5 and maybe some other criteria pollutants. It's going to be somewhere in Ward 8, an EJ underserved community. And one reoccurring theme throughout this presentation is we're not just deciding this on our own. We're getting a lot of community involvement, and we're doing this through a means of a community forum. So about like a month or so ago, we had a community forum where we invited community members and stakeholders to participate in the selection process for where this monitoring station is going to go. Not only did we do it internally and working with EPA, but we asked the residents, hey, where do you think we should put this site? These are the pollutants that we're going to measure, and just kind of like show them how they can access the data. Like, just having that transparency between government agency and resident, right? That survey does work. I will tell you, it's not live though. So if you do fill it out, we won't see it. But in there, we kind of ask people, like, what are some of their issues they may have? What are some locations for the next monitoring station that they would like? And we came up with like quite a few places. We still haven't pinpointed it yet, just because we're just trying to make sure we have that community involvement. But once we decide that, we should have something like, in place, or at least like, starting the building of that by this winter, right? And just to kind of touch on like the next thing that we're doing in DOE, not going to go too much detail, but the hyperlocal mobile air quality monitoring, right? This is another intentional project that we're doing within DOE. So we awarded ACLIMA the contract. We're happy to have them. We started off with like a 2-week pilot somewhere in mid-June, and we're targeting 4 communities. So Buzzard Point, Ivy City, Brentwood, and Mayfair. Currently, the data is being processed, and it's going to be under review by DOE staff once ACLIMA is finished with it. And then we're going to share that information to the public. The next phase would be to do like a year-long expansion, somewhere maybe like fiscal year 24, sometime in October, right? And then again, I like to stress that that data is going to be made to the public. When we unveiled the 2-week pilot, we made sure we had community members out there. They even got the opportunity to ride along in the vehicle. And what's going to result from this is we're going to have like monthly meetings where we invite community members out, and we just kind of keep them updated on what's going on and what the data actually looks like. All right. And another thing that we're doing within DOE, the Community Monitoring Grant. This is a project that I'm fairly interested in. If you can see in this picture, that is a park bench, but it's just not a regular bench. You can sit on it, but it actually picks up ozone. It takes PM 2.5 readings, and it also does a little bit of meteorology, get wind speed, wind direction, which is very important. This particular monitor is at the zoo. So if you ever get the opportunity to go to the zoo on the Connecticut Avenue, it is right there. I like to tell folks it's right there by the pig pen, so you can't miss it. Um, and with this, the goal is to get 3 more of these stations with the involvement of community members. We're going to create an air quality advisory board based on community stakeholders, community residents, et cetera. And they're going to help pinpoint the location of these park benches. And I think another cool element about this is that we're going to add a storytelling element. So the advisory board is going to pick members of the community to kind of like share their story, whether it be positive or negative, and like how poor air quality has affected their life and what can we do to help improve it. So, just again, a recurring theme, just community transparency and just like, just keeping that conversation going. Something that I work on a day-to-day basis. I'm a data guy, and like, for the rest of the I don't want to say data nerds because it's data jocks, because we use a lot of brain power to kind of like internalize this. I want to talk about the sensor instrumentation. So if I'm gauging the audience on this call, we have like a lot of social scientists, we have a lot of community members and stakeholders, and you guys use like low-cost sensors to kind of get an understanding of what that hyperlocal data looks like. I use low-cost sensor because there's so many. In this picture depicted is a Clarity node. It's a relatively inexpensive device. It's solar power. The two that we have particularly measure PM 2.5, PM10. And you can also get nitrogen dioxide. And we are co-locating at our McMillan site next to the FRM and the FEM. Now, this is important if you're going to engage in this co-location process, because you need to have an understanding of what's exactly going on. So as technology evolves, we kind of shift away from like the bulkier, more expensive equipment. In a perfect world, if we can wheel around this FRM on the left side or the FEM, we would. It's just not feasible. They are very accurate. They do last a long time, but again, expensive, and they're stationary. As opposed to on the right side, we have less expensive. It's mobile. It can be accessed remotely, but it's not as accurate and it has a shorter lifetime. And if you're going to use some of these devices, I would recommend a co-location process to kind of determine like the accuracy and precision of the instruments. On this next slide, again, like you have a picture of a guy that you might know. I mean, he's cool most of the time. Just some more information about the FRM. It's designed to be the most fundamentally sound and scientifically defensible concentration device. It's the gold standard, and just like it's used as a comparative basis for like other measurements. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. I think for anybody that's going to use these, I came up with like my own little 7-step or 7-question process. The first thing I would ask is, what pollutant are we evaluating? This is really important. I say that because it's going to determine what type of sensor you use and how the rest of these steps is going to work. If you're going to measure a gaseous pollutant, it might be a little bit more difficult because you might pick up other gases. Whereas if you're using a PM like instrument, where it's using a particle count, like it might not be as difficult to do so. Next step, choose the reference monitor. So if you're going to co-locate it, you have to ask yourself, like, what am I going to compare it to, right? Am I going to compare it to a regulatory instrument at like, environmental agency? What am I going to do? The next step would just be to select an average time interval. And what I mean by that is, are you looking for 24-hour readings, 1 hour, 5 minute, 1 minute? This is important because if you're getting 1 minute data, that's a lot of data points, right? And that I could also when you're asking yourself, am I comparing it to the 24-hour standard, which would be 12 micrograms per meter cubed, or am I comparing it to the hourly standard, which is 35 micrograms? So that's another question that you have to ask. And step 4 would be, how long will co-location last? Now, there's no perfect answer for this. You can do it for a day, you can do it for a week, you can do it for several months. One thing I would recommend to folks is you have to ask yourself, what type of area do I live in? DC is a more humid area because we live in like a subtropical climate region. So humidity does affect the performance of these devices. So you might want to co-locate them a little bit longer in this area because you want to see how they perform during really humid and really hot environments. Next step would be, Will there be any cross-validation techniques? And I guess what I mean by that is like, are you going to develop any like, statistical models to like train these devices to make them more accurate? The next step 6 would be, what is my correction model? I think what's really cool about a lot of these devices is the companies that make them come up with their own correction model. If you use Purpleware, EPA made their own model. It's on their website. So you can use it to adjust the data. It's not really difficult. Clarity, which we do use, they provide a service where they apply a correction model after like, several months, several weeks of co-location. And the last question I would ask myself, which you can really like move around and like ask yourself in the beginning, how accurate do I need my data? And I think this is one of the most important questions because it really depends on who your audience is. If you're talking to community members or like, residents, you might not need something that will say, hey, this is exactly 12 micrograms per meter cubed. You can communicate your data in terms of AQI, which is based on a range. So if it falls within a range, it doesn't necessarily have to be as accurate to like communicate meaningful like information. But if you're talking to maybe some scientists, you might want it to be more in line with the FRM. Okay, so for my next slide, I just wanted to kind of share with you all maybe like, some low-cost sensor data that we've been doing at the district. I do want to point out this note at the bottom. It's a draft. Please do not cite this or quote it. Don't ask me for it because I won't share it. And this is just like a test that we decided to use on like 2 low-cost sensors at our McMillan site because we're looking to deploy some of these at schools within the district. If you notice at the top, this is daily PM 2.5 concentrations. It's not adjusted, meaning there's no model applied. And this is from data from February to June of 2023. We had 2 sensors, one dubbed alpha and one dubbed beta. And you can see how the performance fares as the months go on. That blue line is a line of best fit. And then the black line is a 1-to-1 line. So it pretty much shows how the device fares with the FRM, which is on the x-axis, and the low-cost sensors on the y-axis. So as you go further above the line, it shows more of an over-prediction. And what I mean by that is like, it's less accurate. But as you get closer to like, the summertime, you see the performance tend to increase for the device. And I'm going to touch on that in like about 2 slides. The next one shows the performance after the model is. So you see for months of like February through April that once the model has been applied, you see an improvement of performance. But one thing I want to point out that you probably can see is you see a drop off as the months go on. And yeah, as the months go on, like during the summertime. Okay, want to make sure I'm good on time. Last couple of things we're going to talk about is just like the preliminary analysis. So long story short, we see that the performance of the clarity, of the low-cost sensor changes based on what the model is. So we noticed that the model does a good job at correcting the data during low pollution events. So like during the winter months. But as temperature and humidity tends to increase, we see that it tends to over-predict under-predict once the model's been applied. And just to provide you with some values, you see that before it's been adjusted, both alpha and beta are reading 176 and 180 in comparison to the FRM, which is 120. But once the model's been applied, they're both giving readings of 55. And the reason why that's meaningful is because this is taken from June during the Canadian wildfires, right? So the FRM got a reading of 120. And before the model was applied, you see that it has a higher range. And then once it's been applied, it lowers it. Just to kind of like give you some insight, we see in some cases out of the box, which means no model applied, the devices perform better during high pollution events as opposed to once it's been applied. So I guess just some, final thoughts on this is you need to ask yourself, how good is the model that you're going to use if you're going to use one? Some devices, they perform just as fine without using a model in high pollutant areas as opposed to non-polluted areas. And I guess like the final thing I want to touch on, which is the most important element, is the community outreach aspect. So these pictures were selected with intention. On the upper left-hand side, that is the Benning Road Station, where we were handing out air quality magnets after the Canadian wildfire event, which pretty much shows people what those color coordinated charts mean that you might see on AirNow.gov. On the upper right-hand side, we were in Ward 5, talked about electrification of devices, such as lawnmowers, weed whackers, etc. And at the bottom, that is myself at local high school teaching children about air quality. So DOE is meeting people where they are, they're explaining the issues, and we're just trying to, again, like, keep this consistent transparency and dialogue in place. And that's it for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you, King. I think we probably should move on to Davita. Do you want to present next? Oh, Davita, you're muted.
Sorry about that, Jacoby. And I should be able to get through this in about probably 10 to 12 minutes because I know we don't have a ton of time. But I will walk us through sort of what we're doing in DC and then show you sort of what our platform looks like. So in DC, we were approached by community members and the regulator. And so we're actually doing a project in DC in partnership with the regulator and members of the community. It's really powerful when all of the stakeholders come together this way and they guide us in what we're doing. This actually slides from a presentation that we organized where we met the community, really wanted to understand why they were there, why they cared, what were the things that were driving them, what were the things that they were worried about. Again, a very powerful meeting. I won't go through the entire agenda, but just sort of giving you a bit of an overview of how we engage. But community engagement is a central piece of our work because it really both informs what we do as well as guides our analysis and where we do our mapping. For this particular phase 0 of the project, which was just a 2-week pilot, the goal was to really kind of demonstrate all of the different capabilities and to target them in a few key areas and answer some preliminary questions. And so that's what we did. And so we introduced our technology, we introduced Aclima, and just grounded expectations on what was likely going to come out of this. We don't know, right? We come in with all the instrumentation, all the sensors, and I'll talk about what the platform does in a second. But when we launched this, we launched it with representatives from the White House, from the administration, which were super exciting. And so we've gotten a lot of support and a lot of excitement about this work. But this is really what it means to do community grounded work that is bringing the best possible technology to the table. We are not FRM, but we are sort of the next best possible technology to measure these kinds of pollutants. And so just to talk through what we're doing, we're mapping block by block across, we're mapping air pollution and greenhouse gases block by block across Ivy City, Brentwood, Mayfair, and Buzzard Point. And these particular communities were chosen because they have historically been at the center of disproportionate exposure to environmental hazards, which has resulted in both poor air quality and poor health outcomes, but also very little data in those communities. And so this was an opportunity to really shine a light on what is happening and to discover what more do we need to learn, because 2 weeks isn't going to be enough to learn everything we have to learn, but it's going to tell us a lot about what's happening in the community and where there might be problems and where there might be things that we need to, and the regulator and the community need to continue working together to address. And so really gaining that valuable data-driven insight, increase resident awareness of these issues. So a lot of times we've worked in places like West Oakland, for example, where there was no data until we really started working with community groups there who've been doing some amazing work for years, but hadn't been able to really do this at scale. But Miss Margaret and others, really leaders that have been shaping the space. We've been so proud to be able to work with them and really bring the technology, the best possible technology, into communities to really address these disparities and to help decision makers. I mean, the most powerful impact of our data is that it helps policymakers see. And I remember I was talking with Sabrina about this. I'm like, isn't it ridiculous that we have to go in and take these measurements, because this is everything you've been saying, but for the first time we're able to put numbers next to the advocacy, and so that becomes very powerful. And so the way that we do this is with electric vehicles that we instrument with sensors and with equipment. All of the data streams every single minute, so it's in real time to the cloud, to the internet, and we stitch it together into a piece of software that enables us to do very, very fine-grained analytics on all of the different pollutants that we measure and all of the different sources. So it's not just about measuring one pollutant over another, it's about doing the kind of analysis that tells us this isn't just PM 2.5, this is black carbon. And this isn't just black carbon, this is black carbon from this particular kind of fuel burning. And so what we're very focused on at Aclima is understanding source. Because when you understand sources, you can take policy action. And so we do a lot of work in that area to connect the dots between our measurements and where the heck is this stuff coming from? Once you can start to answer those questions, it really changes the game. And so our data, we've taken, I think I've shared, like, it's been about 12 years of development continuously to really develop these methods. We have a lot of published papers. We've done a lot of work to really ensure that what we're doing is scientifically backed so that communities can use it, leaders can use it, policymakers can use it, community organizers and urban planners and nonprofits across the board. We really want the data to inform a new way of understanding what's happening in our communities and to then use that data to make investments. So the other thing that we've done is that we've done a lot of work over the last 2.5 years to connect the dots between our data and the IRA. Because at the end of the day, if we're just measuring to tell you what you know, that things are bad, we're not helping, we're not supporting you. But if we're helping to tell a story about what's happening in your community so that you can go get the money and bring the money to actually fix these issues, that is what's going to make a difference. And so this moment right now with the IRA and all of the investment that's going into our communities is a very powerful moment, and one that we're very committed to supporting across the board. We haven't yet launched, but we're about to launch in Cancer Alley. We are mapping all of New York state in support of their climate law. And so our data can really play an important role, that's not the only ingredient, but it's an important ingredient in kind of changing the course here. And for the work in DC, for this first phase, we're doing PM 2.5, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, black carbon, and then we do a screening of TVOCs. We also do speciation. That usually we're going to do in the follow-on parts of the monitoring where we go much deeper. We will generate all of this into maps and visuals. We'll give it to the DOEE. They'll consult with the community, and at that point, the community and the DOEE will decide, do we want to continue on for multiple years? We hope the answer is yes, because we think this data can bring in a lot of money to the community, not to us, to the community. And so that's really what I think we designed the company to do, to really be a catalyst for action. And so excited. And the analysis is happening right now. We're putting the maps together. So those are coming out soon. I was so sad that we weren't able to show the data yet, but we're almost there. But Ivy City, Mayfair, and Buzzard Point is where we have the initial data. We did some preliminary mapping maybe like a year ago just to do the demonstration. And within a few minutes, we found a major gas leak. We found all sorts of stuff. So we're very excited to bring this to the community and to the regulator. And there's always caveats, because when you do short-term studies, you don't capture everything, but you can capture a lot. And so we're very transparent about what we think this will capture and what we don't think it will. But over on the longer time series data, we will be able to capture a lot more. And so we also do stakeholder interviews and really engage the community in helping us understand what's the best way to deliver this so that you can use it And it's not just numbers, it's not just charts, it's not just graphs. It's the data compiled in a way that helps community members tell the stories that they want to tell, and to tell the stories that are really going to change the game in the communities that they know. And so we're very committed to this and very committed to being open and ensuring that decision makers and community members have what they need. Let me see if the system is going to let me show you the software. I don't know if it will, but if we can take a second here, I should be able to do this. Yeah, so can you see the data here? Anybody tell me? Jacoby?
It looks like it's starting to load, I think. I can
Okay.
see a map.
Okay. So
Maybe
if you
it's
can
slow.
see a map,
It's
maybe
slow in loading on my end, but
okay.
here it
Okay.
comes.
But I just wanted to show you, this is the full software. This is where the data streams in. This is PM 2.5 distributed across a part of New York, block by block. And we can see exactly where the levels are the highest. We can go in and understand what's happening in those locations. And then when you zoom out, you can see the differences in one side of the community versus another. We can go in and see air toxics, and actually understand precisely where all of the highest points of measurements are for the air toxics, and really understand what's happening in these areas. And so again, very powerful data that helps us really pinpoint the site of these pollutant events. And this is the site where we see these big spikes. And so without this kind of measurement, without this kind of block by block data, maybe a few community members suspect that there's something here, but having measurement helps us really validate and verify, and quite often validate what the community experiences all the time. But also when we don't see things, actually helps us understand, oh, this thing that we thought was a problem, actually that wasn't the problem. It was this over here. We have huge stinky methane leaks, and now we know where they're coming from. And so being able to measure all of these things is really powerful for getting to ground truth on what's happening in your community. So I'll stop there. And the reason I'm so excited about this data, and that my whole team has been building with me for so long, is that we really see the transformative effects of this. And the scale of the problem, is so big. But for the first time in history, we have an opportunity to really address it and invest in the communities that have been left behind. So thank you so much, Dr. Wilson, for inviting me, and really such a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that great presentation. Prashona, you want to go next? Do you have slides, or you just want to talk about your program?
Yeah, no slides, just talking about the program. So in line with what everybody covered, so we are doing the Air Justice Project. We started this summer in July. We recruited ambassadors, air ambassadors from each ward in the district, and now we've become the squad. So we've been learning all about air quality. So it started with Ade and I, who's our local scientist from American University. She installed purple air monitors in each of our ambassadors' homes, so they can track their own air quality, like in their neighborhood. And Ade will be compiling all of that data to show them in October the results of our program. And we've been meeting with scientists, with policymakers, with community workers. Sabrina was super, super supportive, and offered us a lot of data from Ivy City. We've worked with Mike from Energy Justice Network, and he's given us a lot of data on landfills and incinerators and their impact on the air quality in Virginia specifically. That's where DC dumps our trash, and 9 landfills and 1 major incinerator in Lorton. We've worked with Barbara from Beyond Gas in the Sierra Club, and learned about the dangers of gas stoves, and just a number of folks in the community who are experts in their field and compiled all of this information to spread awareness to our ambassadors. So we did it in a series of, I believe it was about 4 or 5 workshops. We split it up: indoor air quality, outdoor air quality. We split up outdoor into industries and vehicles, and then what can we do about it? Inequity and solutions. Um, so from all of that, they just trained in it and became sort of masters of a lot of the material. And then they hosted their own clear the air workshops, is what we called it, for their communities. So we have 2 more left. We have one this Friday at Buzzard Point in Ward 6, and it'll be held at their community hall, their resident room on the property, but also open to folks outside as well. And then we have a Zoom one from our youngest air ambassador next week. She's a student at School Without Walls and a Brentwood resident. And she'll be hosting hers next week. And our whole mission, we partnered with DOEE on this project as well. So we will be, we're just looking forward to transitioning our air ambassadors into this program, into, just instrumental members of the DC Environmental Justice Coalition and Empower DC, so that they stay connected to a network of folks who care about their health. So yeah, that's been the program. And for me personally, I've been blessed to be able to coordinate it. And I've learned a lot. Personally, they say teaching is the highest form of learning. So I had to learn it in order to share it. And I've seen them, all of our air ambassadors just increase in confidence, in being empowered for their own health. And really our big thing has been just to simplify all of this, right? At the end of the day, this is about your health. This is about our health and how the quality of the air impacts our health. So we gamify it. We do it in our workshop as we do a game called Will It Jack You Up? So we just present different potential sources of air quality issues. And we ask the audience, will it jack you up? And it could be mold, it could be factories, trees, plants, and they have to answer the question, of whether they think it will mess up their breathing in any way, and how. And then we connect them to sources, to resources, to and also tips to make sure that they're not around something that's polluting their airways, and if they are, what they can do about it. So yeah, it's just been a process of collecting all of these resources so that folks leave feeling empowered. And I've been blessed to be able to see that starting to take place in different communities all over DC. So this is just the beginning, and we look forward to further empowerment as we come up with ideas to bring this to more of DC.
Thank you for that. Thanks for those presentations. I know, Sabrina, you didn't get a lot of time, so I'm gonna give you the mic next. Can you take some minutes to chime in on what you've heard from Kane, from Davita, also what you just heard from Prashana about what all the great work they're doing with the Air Ambassadors program and all the stuff that's happening at the community level? Go ahead.
Yes, I wish I had several hours to go over that, but what's very important is that we simplify the data. Like Davita said, they go from block to block doing the monitoring versus DOEE needing several monitors and have to come up with a right monitor for a specific toxin. And here in Ivy City, we don't have time for that. We have many toxins, and we need sensitive monitors that's going to break it down to let us know what toxin is poisoning us the most, basically, because we're being poisoned every day. And with the community's knowledge, like Prashana said, they are breaking everything down so that you can feel empowered. The community needs to feel empowered to know that they can take care of their health. They are aware of what's going on in the community, in simple terms. And sometimes when you come into the community with a lot of numbers and a lot of scientific language, you will lose us, me included. You will lose us. And so it's very important that we have support when it comes to gaining knowledge about what is being done in our community, who is poisoning us, how we're being poisoned, and at what levels. That's very important. And so I'm excited to find out about the results from the Aclima car. I was one of those that was able to get into it and drive around, and that was cool. That was super cool. The air ambassadors, I saw them from day one, and then as weeks came along, like she said, they were very confident in the knowledge that they were sharing actually to some youth from Ivy City, some youth leaders in Ivy City. And when I heard them, I was like impressed. I was very impressed because the issues that's going on in Ivy City is going on in Ward 5, ward wide. And if once we have the knowledge, then we will have the tools to fight, and we'll know who to fight and how. And again, I'm excited about the Aclima car with NEP, this chemical plant. Again, they've been poisoning Ivy City for almost 100 years with no air permit from the Air Quality Division of DOEE. So DOEE will need to come with some monitors that is sensitive enough to pick up all of these chemicals, all of the compounds, and at what levels they're polluting the community. And it's not just NEP. We have several parking lots of district agencies that have trucks, and we have a lot of idling. Again, like I said earlier, 3 minutes is the law. We have drivers actually that will idle for hours, which is illegal. And these companies that are allowing this to happen, there should be consequences. And apparently there's not. So the laws should be stricter when it comes to emissions from the trucks that are idling. We need consequences for these businesses from these agencies that are allowing their employees to idle with saying nothing, or maybe a slap on the wrist. And sometimes you have people that will pay fines. They will pay fines, and they'll just pay it and just keep going along with business, as if there's no community here, as if there's no human beings that are being affected about what they're doing. So yeah, I can go on and on. I can go on and on and on. But right now, I'm excited about seeing the results. And I'm also excited about the EPA. They're doing monitoring in our community as well. I want to know what's going on there. And all of us need to come together. It's not doing us any good by having data from several entities, because something is going to get lost. We need everybody, all the agencies to come as one and give us simple language data to let us know what's going on in our communities.
No, thank you for
Sabrina,
that.
I was just going to say, to your point about how we need to come together, none of these things, like, everybody fulfills a different role. The regulator's role is super important in helping set that standard. We fill a data gap, right? And then the community engagement piece is super important. I just want to make sure, like, I don't see any of us as competitive, but as coming together to tell the whole story. And so I think that's an incredible point, Sabrina.
Yes, that's something that we need to see. Everybody is siloed in their own divisions. You have one division in the agency that is that me?
Oh, no, let's see.
Yeah, if you're not speaking, you should probably mute. Go ahead. So go ahead, Sabrina.
Yeah, you have agencies you have divisions within the agencies that don't even communicate with each other. So you have a division within an agency that knows about a polluting industry, and then you have an agency that doesn't, which doesn't make any sense. So then there's something wrong there. And then not only that, we don't want to be gaslit. We know what's going on in our communities. We live here. We're here every day. So we, we address this to the agencies, and we expect for the agencies to comply and support us. And we're getting a little of that as well. We're getting stuff that we don't understand, and a lot of folks that are not working together. And like what Davida said, everybody is doing almost the same thing. EPA, DOEE, and ACLIMA, y'all have the monitors to do this work and to figure out what's going on with these with the pollutants and the toxins. And we don't have time to wait years and years and years. We've waited, Ivy City in particular, we've waited almost 100 years to find out what's going on here in our community and what's making us sick. And we don't have 100 more years to find out. We want to find out tomorrow.
Thank you, Sabrina. Sabrina still need action, right? You looking for action. Rochelle, you want to go ahead and jump in?
Yes, I was just saying Sabrina just riled me up, like for sure. So yeah, a big thing with all this stuff with air justice, with the air ambassadors, has been simplifying, just like Sabrina said, because it doesn't need to be so complex, right? Like, it is complex, but it doesn't. It, at the end of the day, this impacts our health, right? This impacts your children's health, right? This could be the reason why your kids have asthma, why you have respiratory issues, right? So that's what we centered it in, right? And when we did that, what we realized, even with our air ambassadors, is we don't have to talk at people, right? Everybody has experiences with breathing, right? So you just bring up these you bring up things like mold, right? You bring up things like pests. A lot of folks, especially in the city, we have experiences around that, right? So then it just becomes a story share, of like what we experienced, what helped us, what we weren't aware of. And a lot of it becomes like, because of this like resource story share, that helps us to understand where there are policy gaps, right? Like, for example, even within my own experience as a tenant in a house in DC, our landlord wasn't doing what he's supposed to do, right? He wasn't maintaining the property, and that resulted in dampness and mold over 10 square feet, which a lot of folks don't know. DC by law requires that if it's over 10 square feet of mold, then it has to be handled by a licensed DOE professional. And we're doing that, right? So then how do you hold them accountable? Well, what we found out from this experience is that the main way to hold them accountable is to file a complaint with DOE and DOB. When you file that complaint, they come in for the inspection, and it's not warnings. It's immediate fines, and not slight fines, huge fines. Like, you're talking about $1,000 per like smoke detector or carbon monoxide detector being off, right? You're talking about like tens of thousands of dollars. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of fines. And and this is something that we started to discuss, like, is that helpful to us as DC residents? Because then we become the enemy of our landlord, right? If we then it's like, then all of a sudden it's like we're the one responsible for them having tens of thousands of dollars worth of fines, as opposed to, well, here's a warning, you get this stuff done by this time, and if you don't, then we'll issue tens of tens of thousands of dollars with that. I think that's a little bit more fair, right? And then it protects us. Like I mean, my family was even worried about my safety, my actual physical safety, if I went through that. So just imagine, like, what we have for accountability structure in the city. Is it really serving us? And what amendments do we need to make, so that it actually does help us, like I'm Aaron Bass asked too, what happens when you put an odor complaint in 311.dc.gov? Right? We have a resident, one of my folks down the street, they've had traffic concerns, right? On their streets, just a lot of speeding happening. Folks have been literally running into stuff. They've been filing it on 311.dc.gov. And the response was, it's not enough of an issue, right? So it's like, what happens when you do the things, but it's still not bringing you the results, which clearly Ivy City has gone through, Brentwood's gone through, right? And this is the work that we're facing every day. It's like, and like, how do we get people to care? And the big thing that we've seen is that start with your breath, your kid's breath, and then go from there. Not like showering all of this like scientific data like all on people, because it's too much, right? We get overwhelmed. It's information overload, right? At the end of the day, how are you? How is your health? And what in the environment could be impacting your health?
Yeah.
Hold a second, David. No, Davida, thank you for that. Just wanted to say, really important transparency, making it useful for people, that it's actually, and as Sabrina said, the action, and Prashona just gave a lot of examples of if you a lot of the process, right? You talk about process, nothing happened, or how can you support a less adversarial approach to dealing with rental properties, landlords, to making sure that we support them too. So it's not adversarial with the tenants, because that creates a safety issue. I think that's a really important point. And a point I want, before I go to you, Davida, a point Sabrina made about the enforcement. So the fines for idling may not be high enough, and then the lack of enforcement, right? So this is one of the key in those points as part of what are the next steps for folks in DC. Go ahead, Davida.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually interject two things based on comments, because I can't go in and like actually put my responses to the comment, but there were two questions that I wanted to respond to, which sort of connect to this, which is, how does ACLIMA charge for our services? And then the other one was around, are there plans to use ACLIMA data to figure out how pollution is affecting people's health? And I'll start with the last one first. But basically, or I'll answer this question. Basically, the way we do things is, when it comes to community groups and nonprofits, we don't want to charge. And so we've actually created a fund where we provide community grants to be able to work with our data, to be able to work with us, to be able to do research, because my goal in starting the company and what we're doing was to bring the best possible technology. However, if we're working with a regulator or with a big agency, we obviously need to get paid for that work. It helps us fund our community work. But in New York, we just gave out a lot of grants. We do this everywhere we work. And so we do charge for work that we're doing with government agencies, but communities, we really try not to. And then we also do a lot of cooperative grant applications. So we'll get approached about an opportunity, and then we will throw resources at it, do the application, do all that work to bring in the money, and actually support our community partners. So just wanted to address that question. With regards to health, this is the single biggest question and the thing that drives me and drives us the most. There has not been enough, actually. There's been a lot in the academic community. There hasn't been enough translation of that work into the regulatory community, because we're still tied to the existing and the older standards. But I think that there's a big movement right now underway. Earlier in the year, the White House featured our work across multiple different initiatives, looking at the connection between our hyperlocal data and heart attacks, our hyperlocal data and birth rate, a lot of different things that we've studied over the years. Not that we've studied, we've handed the data over to scientists for free to do this kind of research. And we love doing that because that is actually what changes policy and what changes the rules. Because at the end of the day, if you're busy with your life and doing what you need to do, you're relying on government, on regulators to do what they need to do to protect. And oftentimes they're actually missing the science to connect the dots. And so we want to support those activities as we're doing all those other things. So we do a lot of work on the health side. And I think the thing that helps us a lot on health is the fact that we're doing these measurements at literally an address level. So we know, right, when we see certain health outcomes and we see our pollution data, that those two things have a connection. We leave it to the health scientists to make those connections, but we definitely generate the data at that resolution to support them.
Thank you for that. I think what's important out of this session is, again, these partnerships and making sure the science and the research is responsive to the needs of communities. Hyperlocal air quality monitoring is responsive to the needs of communities, right? So I just wanted to make that point. Kane, we have a question for you in the chat regarding standardizing the readings with increased background pollution, like the recent Canadian wildfires for Ward 8. You got no previous readings to refer to. So how do you standardize the readings?
Okay, so I saw 3 questions from James. So before I went on, I just wanted to make sure I understood what he meant. So how do we quality control the instruments? So we send a team of scientists into the monitoring stations every week to perform a QA, QC. Most simple way to explain that, they take an instrument, they shoot a certain amount of whatever pollutant it is to the instrument, making sure they get exact readings. So basically, if we're saying that this analyzer reads whatever amount of ozone, is it actually doing that? And we do it on a weekly basis. As far as the monitor, not having a monitor in Ward 8, that is correct. Part of the reason why I mentioned the low-cost sensors is because we don't have monitors in Ward 8. So I'm actually in the process of testing several different types to deploy them in Ward 7, Wards 8, Wards 5, places where there are identifiable gaps in our monitoring network. And I'm just trying to get them as accurate as possible so we can pick up on that block level hyperlocal air pollution that has been mentioned throughout this conversation.
Good, thank you for that. So couple any other questions from any other questions from the audience? So I think Kane, you mentioned, I believe Davida mentioned as well, I'm not sure Sabrina mentioned it, but one big issue in a lot of communities in DC is black carbon. So Davida just talked about air quality that have a lot of traffic, big truck traffic, bus traffic, right? Diesel exhaust is a big issue. So for Davida and Kane, can y'all talk more about black carbon readings and how you're engaging the community around that particular issue? And then well, I'll say that first. So what are you doing around black carbon?
Okay, I can start. You did break up a little bit on that, but I think the overall gist is, what are we doing to measure black carbon? So
Yes,
we have 2 instruments, one at McMillan and one at our near road site, which we use to measure black carbon. We've also been working with other universities and organizations to get some of those mobile measurements that Davida collects. I can let her speak more on that. We are actively monitoring it, and we're looking at other ways to get more of that block level concentrations for it.
Go ahead, Davida.
Yeah, and what we're doing is, so we have black carbon instrumentation in the vehicles, and those vehicles are mapping. So we're generating second-by-second measurements of black carbon. We stitch that data together. We combine it with other signals to understand what the potential sources of black carbon are. So for example, we do work in places like Los Angeles or other places where there's a lot of diesel. And so we look for co-pollutants to then mark the data and say, okay, the most likely source of this particular black carbon is diesel or other sources. And we work with the community to really understand the patterns of diesel contribution in their community. And we can better understand through those conversations, where are the hotspots, where are trucks idling, where are things that, you're concerned about that are coming from this source.
Can I address? I think I saw a question from James as far
Go
as
ahead.
like Davita's validation of the data. So I want to let folks know that we are working together. DC awarded Aclima the contract to conduct this hyperlocal monitoring, and we do have the instruments, but Aclima is validating some of their measurements with our instruments. So when they're
Yes.
routing the vehicle around, they're going past our FRM, our FEMs, and
Yes.
we're comparing the data together to make sure that it's accurate, right? So
Yes.
that's some of that collaboration. We're partnering together to put on these community forums. We're working along with EPA to make sure that the community is engaged and involved. So I would say that we aren't necessarily siloed. We are actively working with together to address community needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we identify these issues together, right? And so we see tremendous value in that partnership and we do this everywhere we work, in partnering with the regulator because, their data is the gold standard. And so we can use that to really ensure that our data is meeting the highest possible levels of quality, and that they're able to make decisions based on that data. And so it's an incredibly important part of the analysis. There's a couple of other questions around, is our data going to be available for academia or for the public? We always have public portals, and then we also have a program where we provide data to researchers for publication to advance the science. So there's a whole program on this, and I'll make sure, Shakobi, that you can post that information to the site.
No, thank you for that, Davita. And just to chime in and add to this part of the conversation, this should be the model. One of the, I think, best practices moving forward. Community, kind of business. I'm gonna say business, social benefit business. I think Davita, you may have said that earlier.
Yeah, we're a public benefit corporation.
Public benefit. Sorry about that. Public benefit corporation. A different type of collaboration, right? So academia, it's great to have academia involved as well. But I know that was mentioned by Persona, and of course we've been engaged with some of the work. But having a business partner who is nimble and agile, and in some ways bringing the innovation into this space. I don't mean innovation as we're curious about this problem, we're going to find a new technology. No, innovation that makes sure actually, as Sabrina said, we get to action. Get this data to action. So use the innovation and get the data to action. So I think this is the best practice. One of the things I want to follow up on, I'm not sure who wants to chime in. It could be Sabrina. Maybe Sabrina Persona could chime in first. When we talk about all this money that's coming down, Sabrina, you're ANC, and then interventions around, charging stations, distributed grids and all the other energy grid stuff, electric vehicles. How do you see, is that part of the solution, y'all? Sabrina, and maybe go first, Persona go second. Is that part of the solution? If it is part of the solution, what's happening in DC to make that happen and to bring the just energy transitions? Because everybody knows justice is the wars we're talking about, right? Go ahead, Sabrina.
To me, is not making things EV or electric. No, we need to get to the root of the problem. We need to get to the root of the pollution. Just making 10 buses electric is not going to solve the issue. Just having half of having the Amtrak train electric and then the CX train diesel is not the solution. We need to cover all avenues and get to the base, the root cause of the pollution, and then work on the electric vehicle situation. I mean, I'm for electric vehicles, but just having a few electric vehicles here and then having diesel tractor trailers here and then maybe some electric cars, that's just it's not working out. That's not going to work out.
It's worse than a Band-Aid. I hear you.
Exactly.
Persona, you want to chime in? Any thoughts?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so there's so many components, right? Like Sabrina mentioned with the trucks, the buses, that's one. So in the case of right now, Shepherd Parkway, bus terminal in Ward 8, they are not getting electrified, right? They're staying as diesel buses, right? So whereas other wards are electrifying, inequity, right? Why is that happening? So if we're gonna be about solutions, let's be about solutions across the board. Let's not do this like inequity game and then see if anybody catches it, and if they say something, then we'll address it. Like if we're doing electrifying, let's do it across the board. You know, so and also I think it definitely is a lot of education. Like even when it came to idling, I definitely didn't know. Like a lot of our air ambassadors didn't know. So that even yesterday I was with my neighbor and he was talking to me in his car and I was like, oh, you might want to turn that engine off because that's gonna come back to you. And he turned it off. There's a lot of there's a lot of education involved in knowing what to look for, right? We shouldn't be seeing trucks out there idling. We shouldn't, if we smell something, like some of our air ambassadors mentioned this over on Southern Avenue. A lot of them had been smelling something off for weeks. Every time they come to Southern Avenue, well, boom, that's an odor complaint. Things like this. And honestly, as a teacher, what I see is that a lot of this stuff really does need to be taught in schools. That's where a lot of our young DC residents are spending most of their lives in, right? And as opposed to doing these science labs that are not necessarily relevant to our everyday living, right? As fun as they might be, pushing for relevant science, things that will actually help us to live in the city and live with one another. That's my thoughts right there.
No, thank you. I'm gonna have to close us out, but I just want to thank you for that last comment about a couple comments about education and making it locally relevant education, bringing the outside into the classroom and having it be solutions focused, right? I think that's something ANC Sabrina pushing for curriculum changes in DC, right? And having as part of the core curriculum, so you're actually training folks, getting them in the pathways of being part of the solution too. I mean, I think that's something we can all work together on. I think having DOE on this panel, ACLMA, there's all kinds of opportunities to engage young people. Have your air ambassadors, have climate ambassadors, get funding for it, and then making sure they actually are out there actively doing monitoring, but activating that data for social change. So I want to thank the panelists. I know we had a couple hiccups with this 3 o'clock slot. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate all of you as colleagues, friends doing this work. Looking forward to hearing more about the collaboration between the community, between the government, and between the business. So I think again that's a best practice. And looking forward to hearing more about the success of this collaboration, and want everybody to take a little bit of break and join us for the 4:30 closing session. I think I'm gonna say it right. There's EJ Gold up in them hills. Y'all know I came up with that. It's gonna be an important session to talk about, and this was really excited that this having day 2 go very well, even with a little issue. But appreciate again everybody's time, and thanks for the panelists for all your expertise and knowledge and sharing today. So thanks everybody.
Thanks for having
everybody. Thank you. Good to see you, Sabrina.
me.
Bye, Kane. Good to see you too.
Talk to you all soon.